here for the United States in the Middle East?
Well, I think it's directly on point, and if you want, you should read Professor Kennedy's book, Professor Kennedy of Yale, The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, where Professor Kennedy looks at all the modern European empires and goes through their rise and fall, the debasement of their economy, expansion, the same thing. And he was the one who, developed this term imperial overstretch, that you have a choice at some point. You can either pull back and dissolve your empire, or you can make the last fatal leap to, the next piece of territory, trying to conquer it, and in the process, destroy yourself. So I think although Professor Kennedy, in his book, The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, does not apply his analysis to the American empire, I think it's directly on point. And, of course, the Romans, sure. I think, if I remember correctly, he does briefly discuss that in the introduction, but his primary concern is dealing with the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, and the British.
We had another listener who pointed out that there are very few differences between McCain and Obama, that they're largely operational and not ideological when it comes to the Middle East. McCain says that the front for the main front for the war on terror is Iraq and Afghanistan. Obama says it's Iran. But in any case, we're going to be engaged in this long war against Islamic fundamentalism. Do you agree with that statement, that there's actually very little difference between these two candidates on this issue?
I think that is correct. McCain, all his top advisors, foreign affairs advisors, are the neoconservatives who controlled and dominated the Bush administration foreign policy for the last 8 years. So we'll have, if McCain is elected, another 4 or 8 more years of the same, including the further consolidation of a police state here in America. As for Obama, if you look at his Middle East advisors, they're basically spear carriers and mouthpieces for the Israel lobby, headed in chief Dennis Ross, who ran the so-called Middle East peace negotiations. I was there helping the Palestinians, and he just towed the Israel line all up and down.
So Francis, don't you think that the two candidates are basically playing politics here? Because they saw what Ron Paul did, and when Ron Paul may be speaking the truth, it didn't help him as far as getting elected. So do you think the two candidates are playing to their kind of constituents to get elected, and they may have different ideals once they get in office?
Well, if you look at who's paying for these candidates, certainly Obama's supporters. I'm here in the state of Illinois, are all pro-Israel people, and that's where all his money's coming from, a lot of it, and that's why he has these advisors around him, and that's why he has fired people who tried to bring a different perspective to bear on the Middle East, like I think it was Flint Leverett, simply because he had met with some Hamas people as part of a research project that he was engaged in. So I guess you can say there's some posturing, but if you look at the cast of characters, it probably won't be much different from what we saw with Bill Clinton. It won't be perhaps as bad as George Bush, but it'll simply be a continuation of Clinton policies toward the entire Middle East.
Final question. If you had an hour with our next president, what advice would you give?
Well, they're not asking me for my advice. It turns out it's very interesting. I have large numbers of former students of mine up there working and running the Obama campaign. And I have not received one phone call from any of them asking me my advice on anything.
What advice would that be?
Well, I haven't thought of it because no one's bothered to call me. As for McCain, it's all the neocons that I've been fighting ever since I went to the University of Chicago with all of them. I went through the same program at the University of Chicago that produced all of the neocons. Wolfowitz was there, Chalabi, Khalilzad, all the rest of them. I went through the whole neocon program in the political science department there. It's a horrendous place. Certainly don't send any of your children to the University of Chicago to be brainwashed to become a neocon. And again, all of Obama's top economic advisors come from the University of Chicago, the same people that gave us Reaganomics.
Professor Boyle, where can our listeners find more about your work and your book?
I guess if you hit my name on Amazon.com, I now have 11 books, and they should all come up.
Very good, sir. I want to thank you for being a guest on our show. Thank you so much for your contribution to this debate and for your ideas, not just your ideas, but for basically speaking the truth about the Middle East and our policies in the Middle East. Professor Boyle, thank you so much for being on our show.
Well, thanks, and a special thanks to community radio. I think, that brings you programs like this, and I think we all need to provide whatever economic support necessary to keep community radio and programs like this on the air.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have our membership drive, I think, in October, because our